What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the poll that I put out a couple of days ago. It's still ongoing, and it seems, now, I didn't ask what people wanted, I asked people's opinion, what they think the next book will be. So let me give you a little bit of background in case you saw it and you were unaware, maybe you just found the channel, or you've been out of loop on the news. So we know from various sources, the main source being Ray Winninger, the head of the Dungeons & Dragons team overall, that 3 books are indeed coming this year. We know that Wild Beyond the Witchlight is coming in September, and we know Strixhaven, A Curriculum of Chaos is coming in November. We also know that there is a 3rd book coming in between those two. Reasonably, it seems like we would assume that that book comes out in October. We have, I think, September 21st and November 16th. Probably somewhere in that 15th to 22nd region, we'll get this 3rd book. Now, they could do a weird thing and be like September 21st and September 28th. That seems dumb. Give people time to get into the books and save up money in case they need to, put stuff away to buy the next book. So presumably this 3rd book comes out somewhere in the October teenish to early 20s range. We have no concept of what that book is. There has been no information. It was basically just teased in that tweet. I think we'll likely get information at D&D Live coming up in July. They'll likely tell us a little bit about it, or we'll get information about it in September at D&D Celebration. I do feel like that will be too late, so I don't know. But the thought process is, what is that book? Now, I put out this poll, which is right here, and it says, the secret book to be announced, what do you think is going to be, drow or dragons? And it's currently sitting at 60%, 66% dragons, 34% drow. Now, why did I pick those two things? Well, we've seen a lot of stuff in favor of both. Now, I thought Dragonlance was coming out this year. I stated that several times earlier in the year, and I turned out to be completely wrong. It's likely coming next year. We know the 2 classic campaign settings are coming in 2022. I still stand by one of those being Dragonlance. So, we have gotten 2 Unearthed Arcana subclasses, draconic subclasses, in the Way of the Ascendant Dragon Monk and the Drake Warden Ranger, right? So that was 2 of those. And we also got a Unearthed Arcana Draconic Races, having 3 revamped Dragonborns, as well as an updated Kobold, some feats, and several new Draconic-based spells. So we haven't heard anything about them since. The only recent Unearthed Arcana we got was about Strixhaven, which is coming in November. Now, we know they try to release stuff that seems like the time frame has cut down significantly. It used to be stuff would get released 6 months to 8 months, maybe even more than that, before it would end up in a book. So you'd have more than enough time to play and play test things, provide feedback, and then you'd get that information to Wizards, and they could figure out what they liked, see what the general, what the climate is of their particular thing they've released, and then make that decision to put it in the final product. That seems to have completely gone out the window with what we saw from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Now, we got our undead, or our gothic, whatever they were called, subclasses part 4, which was the undead warlock and the spirits bard. Now, that I think came out last August. So that was, several months before the book finally dropped. But we also got the Gothic Lineages Unearthed Arcana earlier this year, and then it turned around and they were published in the book, although, albeit with several different edits. So it seems the time frame from one to the next is significantly shortened. Now, I think it was somewhere in the range of like 3 months from that Gothic Lineages UA to what was published in the book. So we got, I think it was either end of last year or early this year, we got the subclasses part 5, which was the draconic subclasses. And then again, earlier this year, we also received the draconic races, or draconic options, I think it was called. So that's a lot of dragon stuff. And if it's not coming in Dragonlance, which is not coming this year, and we also know the general rule is if a year passes, and things don't make it into a published book, and Unearthed Arcana comes out and a year passes and it doesn't make it into a book, it is unlikely that it will be published. That's the general rule that Wizards of the Coast has. So I think that those draconic options were well received. the subclass options. So if we were waiting for it to come out in Dragonlance next year, I think we'd break that point and it probably wouldn't make it. Also, people have informed me that both of those subclasses and the Dragonborn are not really a huge thing in the world of Krynn of Dragonlance, so it doesn't really make sense for them to be associated. So, we know that the book that's coming out in October is going to be worked on, or was worked on, by James Wyatt. James Wyatt happens to be one of the original writers of the D&D 3.5e Draconomicon book, a book that I've talked very highly about, that I very much love, and I have continued to state that I would love to see that in 5e. I think that's been accepted well across the board, that people would love a book like that. It's also a great way to introduce the concept of monster harvesting and things like that, because dragons are the most commonly harvested monster, I feel like, in all of Dungeons & Dragons. You kill a dragon, people are like, what can we do with the teeth? What can we do with the scales, the blood, the heart, the eyes, the claws, whatever. Everybody wants to do something with dragon bits, and there's no good resource for that. There's plenty of third-party options. There's not any good first-party ones. This would be a good way to introduce that. So, James Wyatt's producing this book. He wrote the last one. By transitive property, you could say, hey, it might be pretty likely that the book we get in October is a dragon book. It could be 5e's Draconomicon. It could be something else, but it's a dragon-based resource given the person working on it and the fact that we've seen a bunch of draconic-based stuff, and then that it will show up. The other option of drow I brought up because of this Summer of Drizzt thing we have going on now, where there's a big push. We got Dark Alliance coming out next week. We have all of this different stuff going on with the sort of rewriting of the drow lore. We have Starlight Archive coming out later this year, a new Drizzt book. We have all of this stuff going on, a lot of big focus on drow. And it would be great to really clean up everybody's understanding of what this is by just putting out a book and publishing the lore in it and saying, like, this is the new drow stuff. Here you go. And then that's the source book. That's the rules, the source of truth for us for all drow-based things. That'd be great. We would know. And I'd be fine with that too. But I think that if they're going to do that, they would likely have teased us or given us an unearthed arcana of drow races, like updated drow. So it would be the law, basically, with the 3 different types of drow. That is ripe for an unearthed arcana release to get feedback on what people think about these changes. It just makes sense to me for that to be an unearthed arcana. And unless we get it in the next month or two, there's no way I think that they'll have enough time to review it to have it come out in a book in October. But again, if the time frame for Unearthed Arcana review has been cut down to like 3 to 6 months, it's possible. But I think the fact that all of this dragon stuff is hanging out there and has been hanging out there for a while, I am in the camp of the 5e Draconomicon or whatever it's going to be, that is the book we will get in October. Now, consistently, they have said that they wanted to get away from things like the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide, nomenclature-wise. They said they had to do Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide because it's iconic and it's what you expect. All subsequent books, of source books, they had made a point early on, and this could have changed, but I haven't seen anything on it, so I'm just going off of that because that's the only direction we have. They wanted it to seem like a book or something you could encounter in the D&D universe. I agree with that, but I also don't agree with that because that was originally what they presented us when Sword Coast Adventures Guide, Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I did find it hard to believe that Xanathar would write a book that you could find, but okay. Then it was Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I'm back on board. I get that, right? But then it was Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is a book about a cauldron, which I thought was a very weird concept. And then these other 2 books I think are more classified, I would say, and that doesn't include source books, right? Like the Mythic Odysseys of Theros or I guess it's Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, so that is kind of a book. And I guess maybe the Mythic Odysseys of Theros could also be a book. So Draconomicon is a book you could encounter in the wild in a D&D universe. So that could be the name. Or they could spin it up to be some other Fizzban's folio of dragons, but with an F. I don't know. But that's my point. So I do think that we're going to be getting a dragon book in October. I hope so. I'm very excited to see what we get. I very much liked both of the subclasses. I would love to see them fleshed out further and fully developed. And I also want to point out that for the most part, folks, most of the things that we've seen in books we've gotten recently with player options, whether they be Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, or Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Van Richten's Guide, and so on, almost all of those things have been presented to us in an Unearthed Arcana. It's very rare in this day and age where we get something in a book that is like we've never seen it before as far as a player option, right? With the exception of basically magic items is the only thing they don't Unearthed Arcana, which is one thing that I feel like they have the best handle at Wizards of the Coast on how to do magic items. But they like new spells, new feats, new magic item, or sorry, new spells, new feats, new class features, and new races always seem to show up in an Unearthed Arcana, and then a version of that will end up in the final product in the book. It's less, I mean, we haven't really had stuff left on the cutting room floor since Xanathar's Guide, where they just bombarded us with a ton of subclasses, and then only some of them made it in. Pretty much now at this point, anything that's been released in Unearthed Arcana has been revised in some way, but that's what ultimately ends up in the book. I think that's the case for just about everything. Like all the subclasses leading up to Tasha's Cauldron, I believe that that's the case. I have to double check, but anyway, that's my point. I just wanted to put it out there. I want to know your speculative thoughts. What do you think? Do you think I'm right and so many other 66% of the internet also agreeing that dragons are the source book coming in October? Or do you think they're going to pull something and give us an Unearthed Arcana about drow in the next couple months, and then it'll be a drow source book? I do feel like regardless of what it is, the other one will come out next year, right? So if we get dragons this year, I do feel like we'll probably get either a drow adventure or a drow book next year, or vice versa. Or, you know, if we get the drow book this year, they'll just stuff all the dragon stuff in the Dragonlance book next year. So, also, a lot of you had said that you were hoping for drow, but you think you'll ultimately end up getting dragons. So I don't know. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.